Hello, welcome to the Sci-Fi Christian book reviews brought to you by the Sci-Fi-Christian.com. Today I am going to be talking to you about Arthur C. Clarke's 2010 Odyssey 2. I believe the movie version is subtitled The Year We Made Contact, or maybe that's just the tagline. But in any case, the novel is Odyssey 2, sequel to 2001 Space Odyssey, which of course you can see Matt and I's review of it, as well as my book review of it on our YouTube page, so check those out if you're interested. But for today, talking about the second book in the series. Now, the first book I gave 4.5 stars to. I really liked it. I thought it was not quite as good as the movie, which is why I knocked it down half a star from a perfect 5. But thought it was overall very successful. This one, I really liked, but it is not as good or anywhere near as good as the first one. I'm going to give it 3.5 stars, and I'll get into why here in just a second. But still, very good novel. Really liked it. I recommend it, especially if you're a fan of 2001, either the movie or the book. You don't necessarily have to read the book if you've seen the movie to enjoy this, and I'll get to why in just a second. But yeah, really liked it. This is a good sequel, a good follow-up, but not quite what it could have been. So why is that? What did I like about it? What did I not like about it? Well, first let me talk about some of the peculiarities of this book, we'll say. I mentioned a second ago that if you've seen the movie, you don't have to read the book for 2001 to move on to this. And the reason for that is that there are some minor changes between 2001 the movie and 2001 the book. They're both being made simultaneously, and so for the most part they are very close together in terms of plot and structure and everything. But there are some minor changes between the two. For example, in the movie they are headed towards Jupiter. In the book their goal is actually Saturn. In the movie, we see the whole sequence of open the pod bay, Hal, and we see David Bowman out in the pod or space pod or whatever it is, trying to rescue the other guy whose name escapes me at the second. I think it's Floyd? Maybe Floyd. We'll go with Floyd for now. And so we see all that, and all of those events with Hal. Hal still freaks out and goes evil and everything in the book, but it's slightly different than in the movie. But what was interesting, and I noticed this right away, and I had to go back and check, and sure enough, Arthur C. Clarke in this book follows the continuity of those events in the movie, not in his own novel, which I'd be very curious to find what his reasoning was there. Not that it's a bad choice or anything, but it just seemed peculiar. That seemed like it would be, since he chose to go in this other direction with the novel, that he would have chosen to stick with his own continuity in subsequent books, but he doesn't do that. And so that kind of throws you off a little bit. It's an interesting choice. I don't know that I would really attach a value to it, positive or negative, in terms of how it impacts the novel. It just kind of struck me as being peculiar, and one I would be interested to maybe learn a bit more about why he elected to go that way. Now, as far as the actual content of the novel itself, most of this novel, it takes the lead character in this one is Haywood Floyd, so it must not have been Floyd, the other guy earlier. I'm confusing my names. But anyway, we got Haywood Floyd, who is the scientist who appears kind of at the beginning of 2001, who's going to the moon, after he had passed the monkeys and everything. And he subsequently leaves the plot of that novel, but he returns. He's kind of the main character in this one, and he is part of a few Americans who are on a joint mission on a Russian ship to go and recover Discovery. So it's fun to see Floyd back and everything. The stuff on the way back to Discovery is interesting, since they're kind of interested, what exactly happened to David Bowman. I think that this is another area that they Arthur C. Clarke retcons a little bit, both with the movie and with his book, where they make a big deal about how Bowman's final words that are heard on Earth are as he's heading into the giant monolith that's on Jupiter now, or Io. I think it might have been one of Jupiter's moons. But anyway, he's heading into the giant monolith. It takes him through the wormhole and everything at the end of 2001. I don't think he says anything in either the book or the movie, but in this one, 2010, they may have repeated reference to his final words being, "My God, it's full of stars," right before he enters the monolith. So a bit of a retcon there. So they're trying to figure out what is going on with the Discovery. Is it salvageable? What can we learn about what happened to David Bowman through this subsequent expedition? And all that good stuff. And it's interesting, but speaking for myself anyway, it's not what I wanted to see. I wanted to find out, we get this great final shot in 2001 of the Star Child looking over Earth. What happens when this thing hits Earth? What happens, if this is supposed to be, as it seems like it's implied at the end of 2001, the next stage of human evolution, and now we're however many years in the future, the timeline is a little bit difficult to follow because of the number of years in space travel, where it takes like 3 years or whatever to get to Jupiter. But whatever, several years in the future, at least, from the end of 2001, what happens when Earth meets the Star Child? What happens when this next stage of human evolution if that is in fact what it is, goes beyond David Bowman to the species as a whole? How does that change us as a species? And there's very, very little of that in the novel, and I found that really disappointing. There are some sequences of David Bowman kind of appearing on Earth, but it's not very clear to everyone on Earth what he is, or if it was even a real appearance. There's reports of UFO sightings, but it's not like, oh, this is David Bowman and he's back and he's a Star Child and everything. It's very vague from Earth's point of view in the novel. We know what's going on as the readers, but from the characters on Earth, it's very vague what they're doing. And then David Bowman makes some appearances on the Leonov, which is the Russian ship that's out at Discovery. He appears to Haywood at one point. Which, by the way, spoilers on this review, I guess. Should have said that earlier. Oops. Stop and kill a mosquito here. They're going all over the place tonight, and now it's dead. This is mosquito heat season here in Minnesota, so brief interlude there to kill a bug. But he makes his appearance to Haywood Floyd, and it's interesting. It's a good part of the novel and everything, but speaking for myself, it's not what I wanted to see. And I don't think that I can just say, a lot of times novels and books don't meet your expectations, and a lot of times I try and just say, well, that's my own fault for having bad expectations, and I shouldn't take off from the novel or movie or whatever for that. But in this case, I really feel like the end of 2001, both the book and the movie made a promise about what we were going to see next, what the subsequent follow-up would be. It's the Star Child coming to Earth, and even it's less direct in the book, but I think the final line is as the Star Child's thinking, well, what am I going to do next? Well, I'll think of something. It's that's going to be what we're going to see, and it isn't. And I didn't like that. I really wanted to see what happens next. Now, granted, there's 2 more books in this series. I can't believe that we're done with David Bowman just yet, or anytime soon. So maybe as I read those 2, I will feel better about some of my complaints about this one. But as it stands right now, just reading it independent of the rest of the series, that's a glaring weak point, and a pretty major one. In fact, it's not even until halfway through the novel that we even see the Star Child in any of its limited activity. Now, okay, so that's my big complaint. That's why it's a 3.5 star as opposed to a 4.5 star that 2001 was. But what's good? Well, despite it not being what I wanted it to be and what I felt like was promised at the end of 2001, I felt like what was there was really entertaining. It is engaging to go back to Discovery. It is engaging as they're working with Hal again, and can he be rescued, and there's some tension involved there. And that's all really well done. As in any Arthur C. Clarke book, he draws you in with the scientific possibilities, and he makes you think about the world and what this type of technology would do to us, and he's so good at that. And so all the vintage elements of an Arthur C. Clarke novel are there. In terms of making you think about science and its impact on humanity and all that great stuff. So what is there in terms of the other story of what does humanity do with trying to figure out what the hell just happened at the end of 2001? What do we do with Discovery? Do we go and investigate the monolith? As far as that plot point from 2001, it's a very worthy follow-up to that. And everything there is well done, it's well written, it's entertaining. It's also the end of the novel, which I will be vague about. I know I already said spoilers, but I don't want to give everything away in case you haven't read it. It's way past the statute of limitations that Matt and I have for spoilers, which is 10 years, but still. The end of the novel's fascinating. Really, the last part is we start to see, without again giving too much away, but Bowman and whoever it is behind the monolith do some interesting things to Jupiter that are pretty mind-blowing and have some really major implications. And I really hope this is something that Clarke explores more in the next 2 books, because he kind of touches on in the last couple chapters. Here's some of the implications, and we don't really have time to explore all that, but they're definitely there. And that's fascinating. It really, in terms of stuff that makes you think, that makes you imagine what if something like this happened, what would our world be like? The events that happen with Jupiter at the end of the novel are really, really good. I also enjoy, and this is some of this in the novel of 2001, I enjoy the occasional glimpses that we get into the minds of whatever creatures are behind the monolith. They certainly seem very Platonic, in the sense that their goal has been to evolve beyond bodies, and they seem to have accomplished that. The emphasis on pure mind, pure thought as the highest ideal, so very Platonic influence in terms of this ideal alien species, or at least ideal in their minds. So Clarke seems positive about them in terms of what he writes. So that's enjoyable as well. I like the philosophical elements that Arthur C. Clarke likes to put in there. So yeah, what's there is good. It just isn't what I wanted to be there, or at least not all of what I wanted to be there, and wasn't quite up to delivering on the promise of 2001's ending. So some unfortunate marks from that standpoint, but still a good novel. On Goodreads, I'll probably rate it a 4, since they don't let us do half-star ratings on there. So 3.5, but an optimistic high 3.5. I would strongly recommend this. If you're a fan of 2001, have never checked out any of the other books, do yourself a favor, check them out. This is well worth reading. I'm definitely going to read the next 2. But on that note, as far as release schedule goes, brief pause in my Arthur C. Clarke reading, because today is June 17th. Tomorrow, June 18th, the new Neil Gaiman novel comes out, so I'm looking forward to diving into that. Looks like it's going to be a pretty quick read, so I should have a review up for that later in the week. And then we'll get started reading 2061, which is, I believe, the next book in the series. And we'll see where the human race goes from there in the Odyssey series. So, in closing, highly recommended. Some problems with it, but nowhere near enough that it should stop you from checking it out if you are a fan. So that's all for now. I'm Ben DiBono, and this is the Sci-Fi Christian Book Reviews. Goodbye.